great to see you once again. Thank you so much for joining us here on Leading Edge. I'm your host, Jeff Smith. We're just days away from the election, as you know. The Democracy and Public Policy Research Network at Bowling Green State University commissioned a web-based poll with YouGov last month. They did that of 1,000 likely voters. And this week, I got the chance to speak to one of the professors integral in that polling and ask him why they think polling works.
I think we should first think retrospectively about 2016 and 2020 and when polling hasn't worked as well as we would hope it would. That in 2016, the miss in the race between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump was such that we weren't really expecting Donald Trump to win that election. The miss in 2020 was actually larger, but the result of the election was still kind of in the expected direction, that people were thinking that Joe Biden would win, and he did. But the miss actually on those polls were larger. And so the question is, why does polling work? Well, because it's based on math, we're trying to get to an accurate representation of what the public thinks at a given time. That is going out to the public, getting a random sample, but also weighting that sample based on certain demographics in the population. So any good poll is going to try to do a few things. Two of the most important things are, for us, to identify who likely voters are. That is, do we think that these people are likely to turn out to vote? That the most straightforward way to do that is to ask them if they're going to vote or if they've already voted. And in our last poll, that with the results that just recently came out, about a quarter of our respondents had already voted, and the rest of our respondents said that they were likely to vote. The second thing that we're trying to do is get an accurate representation of what Ohio's electorate will look like demographically, the proportion of women who will vote, the proportion of men that will vote, the proportion of certain racial and ethnic groups that will vote. And so we're doing that based on a lot of different assumptions, and we do that in partnership with YouGov, our survey platform, and they do a lot of the work on that on the math, on the stats on the back end. And so we're really trying to get to an accurate representation of what the public thinks at any given time.
Margin of error and what that means and how that impacts or affects things.
Sure. So when you're polling and you're trying to get a sample from a population, Ohio has millions of voters, and we're taking a sample just of 1,000 of them. And so when we're doing that, you think of it's Halloween time, right? It's Halloween, and you think about reaching into a bag of candy. And sometimes you're more likely to pull out some pieces of candy than others. And so because some people are more likely to take polls, because some people are less likely to take polls, because we're not entirely sure that our 1,000-person sample accurately represents the millions of people out there in Ohio who will vote, we have a little bit of error in there. And so with a lot of our poll results, for instance, in the current Senate race between Sherrod Brown and Bernie Moreno, that race is within the margin of error. It's a very close race. It is statistically tied because we're not entirely sure that the 1,000 people that we sampled represent the millions of people who will actually vote.
How difficult is it to achieve a random sample? You talk about these 1,000 people, and obviously you're working with a partner, but how difficult is that ultimately?
Well, online these days, it's actually fairly straightforward to get a sample, but the question becomes, how accurate is that online sample that we draw? What sorts of people are more likely to take an online survey? What sorts of people are more likely to take a phone survey, to pick up the phone? There are lots of text message surveys now that people get daily. What sort of person is likely to click that link and take that survey? So when we're surveying people online, which is a wonderful tool to have, we have to understand that the biases of certain respondents, or what respondents are more likely to take an online survey. Younger people. People who live their lives online are more likely to be out there. People who want to share their opinions and are eager to go on a platform like YouGov and say, these are the things that I believe, right? Not everyone has that same propensity to want to share their beliefs. And the same being true with telephone surveys, where somebody, the minute you realize that it's a pollster calling you, you might hang up.
One of the questions you guys asked, how many children under the age of 18 live with you? 0. was 76% of the respondents answering. And part of me takes that and thinks, okay, you got a bunch of older people who are empty nesters. But then to your point, you may have a lot of respondents who are younger people, right?
Yes, I actually, that was the first thing that I looked at this morning because I went backwards through our survey, and that result was surprising to me in a variety of different ways. That's a demographic control variable that we want to include, but I think that could suggest that you have you could have overrepresentation of young voters or older voters, and it's that those middle years of parents that I mean, we're capturing some of them. But it was surprising the number of 1, 2, and 3. I think 1 and 2 were the most common ages of, or the most common number of children under the age of 18. But that really, the mode by far was 0, which was quite amazing. So I looked at that and was a little bit surprised. Whether that's an accurate representation of Ohio voters is something for us to think about.
All right, so we've laid the groundwork when it comes to polling and kind of what they were looking at when they started to send this out and get the participation. When we come back, we're going to dive into the poll itself and wait until you hear what he has to say about there being a psychological edge for those of you out there who chose to vote early and put everything else to rest. We'll be right back. And welcome back here on this Sunday. Welcome to November, after all. We continue our conversation with Dr. Joshua Boston, part of the Democracy and Public Policy Research Network at BGSU. So we're just getting into these poll results. And the first question simply asks, take a look. Ohio voters, if they had voted early, and look at that, almost a quarter of the respondents said yes. I asked Dr. Boston his interpretation of this result.
I found that result to be indicative that these are folks who are eager to have their opinions heard, right? These are people who are eager to be on YouGov, to be on a platform sharing their thoughts about the political world.
Do you think, let me ask this, do you think mentally somebody in this day and age, because we are inundated with the stories, right? I mean, it leads the news every night. We are inundated with the advertisements. Do you think kind of subconsciously people think, I'm going to vote early and then all this is done?
It's a fair question. I mean, to think about the psychological processes underlying early voting, it's an interesting phenomenon. I think for both campaigns this time, there was a push for early voting. In the past, Donald Trump had kind of pushed back on early voting, but this year he's been advocating people banking their votes, and so we have seen an uptick in Republican early turnout. To your point about whether voters are, I'm thinking about this for a minute, whether voters are like, I'm going to vote and then I'm done. I'm going to vote. I don't have to worry about the campaign signs. I don't worry about the phone calls. There might be some of that, but the unavoidability of television commercials during this election, I think it's an interesting dynamic. Also, with the expansion of early voting, and Ohio has done this for several cycles now, but it eliminates the sort of October surprises that have been major factors in previous elections, including in 2016, where the October surprises were quite substantial. This time around, a lot of Ohio voters have already been out there. The things that have gone on this week have all happened after our poll, and we can't account for those.
During the current campaign, have you done any of the following? You gave them a bunch of choices. Number one was none of the above of what you listed. 57% answered that way. However, what grabbed me was the 21% that said, try to influence how others vote. How do you guys read that, and what were you thinking when you posed that?
That result was interesting to me in a variety of ways, because I think in modern politics, oftentimes we think about polarization, that is Democrats and Republicans not wanting to talk to each other about politics. That is, we avoid political conversations even within our family members.
Politics and religion, you don't talk about that at the dinner table, right?
That's exactly right. And with the holiday season coming up, I expect that those things should continue to be off limits for some folks. But this would suggest that actually for Democrats, it was 29% of Democrats reported trying to persuade somebody how to vote, and 1 in 5 Republicans tried to persuade somebody else how to vote. And so there still is this kind of social dynamic in campaigns, whether it's door knocking, whether it's talking to people about their candidate. I've certainly, in the past 3 months, had a lot of conversations with folks about Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And this election being exceptional in a variety of ways, with Joe Biden dropping out, I think that this represents some of those conversations that people are having. Well, now that Joe Biden is out, who would you vote for? And you're having those conversations with family members, with people at work, potentially, with neighbors, and having those conversations, I think, can really help bring back some civility. The research suggests that you're not actually good at reading people's minds. Like, if I were a Donald Trump voter, I'm not going to convince a Harris voter to come over to my candidate, and the same the other way around. But to realize that that's still a person over there, and having those conversations can really be constructive.
Issue one, specifically here in Ohio, obviously getting a lot of play on the air, commercials on the radio, on TV, social media. Ballot drop-off was something that one of your colleagues, Dr. Melissa Miller, brought up. What does that mean as far as that issue is concerned exactly?
So issue one is particularly challenging for voters this term because the ballot language, or the language that is included when you vote, is substantial. It's very long. I have already voted. I voted with my wife right next to me, and she looked at me like, "What on earth is this?" And a lot of voters will think that when they go into vote. So ballot drop off in this case would look like just kind of scrolling past on the tablet, or just kind of skimming over the language of the text, and maybe even skipping over that portion of your ballot and not voting. Ballot drop off in the past could be, you only vote for president when you're in those old voting booths. You vote for president and then you're done voting. Well, that won't work these days, because if you're on a tablet, unless you get all the way through the full ballot and then you go cast that ballot, your vote won't count. In our survey, in our poll, we actually experimented a little bit with short ballot language, and long ballot language to try and see what voters thought of the longer version. We didn't include the full ballot language because it is so substantial, but we gave half of our respondents at random very long language for issue one. And in general, we didn't see huge effects. That is, the support for issue one was still pretty high, around 60%. But among independent respondents that we had, their support for issue one drastically decreased from 62% to 49%. That is a substantial drop in independent support for issue one, and the likelihood of a no vote was also increasing. So this long ballot language. Sorry, go ahead.
You also asked them, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with redistricting being handled in the state of Ohio? And 28%, which was the winning percentage, neither satisfied nor dissatisfied.
Yes, exactly. And across partisan groups, no one is satisfied with how redistricting is working right now. Democrats, 15%, Republicans, 26%, and independents at 16%. No one likes how redistricting is working right now.
Do you think this question leads to your results on do you think Ohio is headed in the right direction answers that you got? Because almost half of your respondents, 49%, said Ohio's on the wrong track.
Yeah, those dynamics are always interesting, and that question always appears in tandem with an evaluation of the national direction. Do you believe the United States is on the right track or the right direction or wrong track? And so there's a little bit of a survey effect, a question order effect with those. If you ask people about the U.S., they're like, well, inflation is bad, immigration is bad, abortion rights. You list all the issues, and then immediately after that, you ask them about Ohio. And so there may be some effect that people perceive Ohio as going in the wrong direction because they also perceive the United States to be going in the wrong direction. But in general, there could also be some relation to gerrymandering in Ohio, or redistricting, or other recent ballot initiatives relating to abortion access and cannabis legalization. All of those things that have been really important issues in Ohio could directly play into voters' evaluations of how our state is doing.
All right, stay right there. When we come back, when Leading Edge continues, we're going to tell you what direct democracy means, how it kind of tied into this poll, and what it means to Ohio voters. Plus, where do you stand on the whole Electoral College versus the popular vote debate? The results of this poll right after this. Welcome back here on Leading Edge. Ohio voters are now well familiar with how their vote can enact change virtually overnight with recent votes on abortion and marijuana. It's a concept known as direct democracy. But how has that power affected the mindset of the Ohio voter? Here's more of our conversation with BGSU Associate Professor Dr. Joshua Boston.
2 years in a row, we've had really salient ballot initiatives put forth to Ohio voters to directly impact either public policy in the state or the function of state government when we think about redistricting. So in these cases, instead of a state legislature passing a bill and the governor signing it and it becoming law, we put forth language to the public to amend the Ohio Constitution to or to create a statute that allows for legal cannabis or constitutional protections for women accessing abortion care within certain parameters. It's kind of a fundamental difference than what is the traditional, like, we vote for people and then those people create policies for us. A lot of states have done this for a long time. Ohio has had these three really salient, highly important ballot initiatives just in the past, really 12 months, where we've experienced the abortion, cannabis, and now redistricting ballot initiatives. And it allows Ohioans to feel as if they have a stake in their government, which I think is very important. It gives them a stake in democratic governments. It makes it seem more like a democracy where the people rule, rather than having these people, several counties away or half a state away in Columbus, just making policies for us.
Number 28, you asked, do you believe presidential elections should be decided by national popular vote or by the current Electoral College system? 54% to 35% said national popular vote. What do you got? What were you hoping to achieve in that question? Because obviously it's tapping into something that's there. I don't know how other states would answer this, but what were you hoping to achieve? What do you guys do with results like this?
I think across this poll, there are a number of questions where we wanted to have an understanding of what Ohioans think about political institutions. And the Electoral College is one of those institutions that is particularly salient in presidential election years. 3 months from now, 4 months from now, people won't think about the Electoral College anymore until the next time around, right? So right now, we want to tap into, at this important moment during a presidential election, what do people think about the Electoral College? And in particular, my colleague, Rob Alexander, who is the head of our Democracy and Public Policy Research Network and helps lead this poll, has strong expertise in the Electoral College and members of the Electoral College. With regard to the national popular vote, that result is interesting, and there is a disparity in the result across parties. That is, Democrats are strongly in favor of Democrats are strongly in favor of a national popular vote, and Republicans are in favor of the Electoral College. And so there is that partisan disparity. Yes, on the whole, 54% of our respondents said that they favor the national popular vote, which suggests maybe some backlash, some long-term backlash against the Electoral College for voters who have voted since 2000 or earlier. We know that it's possible, and it's becoming maybe increasingly debated and frequent that candidates can win the presidency without winning the popular vote. But this was also the case in 1992 when Bill Clinton won the national election with 43% of the popular vote. More people voted for George H.W. Bush and Ross Perot, but Bill Clinton still won the Electoral College vote. So we have this institution out there. How do people evaluate it? At this moment in time, people seem not to like it in Ohio, and that's motivated largely by Democrats who do not like the Electoral College.
Come Tuesday, do you guys watch this kind of like sports fans, and you go into it thinking, all right, let's see how our polling picks turn out as far as these games are concerned?
Absolutely. I mean, as political scientists, this is our quadrennial Super Bowl, and so we spend a lot of time on this. Election years are exciting, and we'll be tuned in. I will have all three major networks on seeing what different networks are calling. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to know the results on Tuesday night, but it's sort of like a multi-day Super Bowl, if you will, where we'll find out who won once all the ballots are counted, and I'm hope that voters feel confident that their ballots will be counted.
From a political science perspective, why do you say you don't think it'll be decided Tuesday night?
The volume of mail-in ballots across states and the different state laws that prohibit Board of Elections from processing those mail-in ballots at certain times. In some states, they cannot open those ballots until Tuesday, even if they've been received many weeks earlier. So it will take a long time for some states to process those ballots and get them scanned and counted. And some of the states will be incredibly close, and they may actually go to a recount. So I would be hopeful that several days after we would know the result, but taking time to get an accurate result is certainly the most important.
Stay right there. We will wrap things up for this week right after this. One final note before we let you go this week. The Brown-Moreno race was also polled during this effort by BGSU. Ohio Senate race has become the most costly Senate race in the country, as you know. And one thing that the poll showed, they said given the headwinds against Brown, he will need to rely on a significant number of split-ticket voters if he is to win another term in the United States Senate. Of course, we'll know all the answers to all of these questions come Tuesday. We appreciate your time as always. If you missed any part of our conversation, you can check it out on the WTOL 11 YouTube page. We're also a podcast on Spotify and Apple. Great to have you with us. I'm Jeff Smith. We'll see you soon.